Over the last few years, diversity, equity, and inclusion went from being one of the most talked about priorities in business to something many people and organizations are afraid to even mention out loud. But what if much of the backlash came from a misunderstanding of what these ideas were actually meant to be? Well, in this episode, former Fortune 500 Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and TEDx speaker Celeste Warren helps cut through the noise and reclaim the original meaning behind diversity, equity, inclusion. She explains why equity was never intended to lower standards, why great leadership still depends on understanding people, and why many companies are quietly continuing this work even as the language around it disappears. This is not a political debate. It's a thoughtful conversation about leadership, hiring, workplace culture, trust, and what happens when organizations stop listening to the people they lead. Whether you support DEI, question it, or simply want clarity beyond the headlines, this episode brings nuance back into one of the most emotionally charged conversations in business today. Celeste, it's great to have you on the show. I appreciate your time. I know you are a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. You've done a lot of work in this space. And I was thinking about preparing for this conversation that those themes have been around for a long, long time. Probably we could trace them back if you really were to do some research, probably 80, 100 years, and it's grown over the period of time. And it's gotten stronger up until recently. Obviously, the societal political framework is now in a different kind of pathway. But it seems that in my mind, it's always been the right thing to do. It's the definitions that we sometimes get into a problem with. So for you to just set us straight, what is the good definition for DEI?
Yeah, so I don't even use the acronyms anymore, Dean. I
Right.
say the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is simply the word means differences. Differences in those differences you can see and those you can't see. Inclusion is how do you include and create a culture where you can get all of these people with all of these different skills, capabilities, identities, cultures, life experiences, learning aptitudes. How do you get them to this collective purpose in an organization? It's the mission or vision of the organization, et cetera. So you surround them with this culture of inclusion so they can each feel this sense of belonging, feel valued, et cetera, for what they bring to the table. Now, where equity comes in is you look at each person and say, okay, what do I need to do with all those people, all those differences? What are those acts of equity that I need to put in place to get them to that collective purpose? So equity recognizes that everyone didn't start at the same place. Everyone didn't go to the same schools. Everyone wasn't born by the same mom and dad. Everyone wasn't born in the same city, town, whatever. You started in different places. So in order to get people to that collective purpose, what do I need to do? And I like to say that equity is simply management 101, leadership 101, and business 101 as well. Because you have to basically get to your customers, right?
Yep.
Your customers are very, very diverse. And so when you're thinking about your marketing strategies, for example, it's marketing 101. It's customer segmentation. You got to understand what's getting in the way of your customers or categories of customers. What's getting in the way of them being able to truly enjoy your product or your service that you're providing? And so you think about that through the lens of the customer and create your marketing strategy from that perspective. So I try to talk about it in a very pragmatic way, so people understand that you can't just forget about it because it's the essence of how you lead, how you manage, and how you run your business.
So there is some out there from, they would take issue with some of the politics around how
Mhm.
this movement has sort of evolved over time to say, well, now we've got situations where people are being hired because of race, not
Mhm.
because of their aptitude, and that's how they start to frame this whole piece, which then goes us down that whole political standpoint. What's your view on that?
Yeah. So if we go back to the 1960s,
Yes.
people were not hired because of their race, their gender, their identity, and all of that. So, civil rights is created, right? And the Civil Rights Act. But the Civil Rights Act basically says in 2026, you cannot hire someone based on their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera. You're supposed to hire someone based on a set of criteria designated by what's required in the role: skills, capabilities, experience, et cetera. Characteristics, some people use as well. But that's basically how you fill a job, how you acquire a candidate.
Hmm.
And where the thing has gone sideways is people misinterpret a lot of the work that's been done, especially since 2020 and the murder of George Floyd, that we're only hiring people. If it's a woman that's hired, she was only hired based on her gender. If
Right.
it's a person of color that was hired, they were only hired because they're a person of color, and not taking into account that that woman is qualified for that role, that that person of color was the best qualified candidate for the role. And so there's this whole rhetoric about, if you do that, you're lowering the standards and the qualifications of the role. You're going to get a lower performing person. And that's one of the myths about equity. That's not what equity is about. It's not about lowering standards or giving someone someone preferential treatment over another, a preferential group, giving someone preferential treatment, a group over another. That's not what it's about.
Right. Okay. So you're saying that the law, the way the laws are written right now, is that we cannot promote or hire a person based on those characteristics, sexuality, gender, age, et cetera,
Mhm.
that it has to be based on these characteristics set by the company. And yet, is there not been some evidence where that hasn't been the case, where we sometimes see, or is it just a false claim? I'm curious about what your thought is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to say that each company cannot. They try. Let me say it that way. They try to put rules, regulations, policies, procedures, practices in place that basically says you don't do that.
Hmm.
A lot of people have outsourced their entire recruiting teams to prevent managers from doing that. But no, the law says, and it's always said that since the 60s, you can't hire based on race, ethnicity, etc. And so, yeah, do you have rogue managers that are doing some crazy stuff? Yeah, you do. You have it in every step of the talent management process, because that's life. People have their own biases. People have, whether conscious or not conscious. But the the way that we put what an organization should be doing is putting practices and policies and procedures in place that try as best they can to take the biases out of the
Mm,
process, so you
mm.
can truly hire the most qualified person. And the thing is, the most qualified person that has those skills, capabilities, and all of those experiences and characteristics can be embodied in a multitude of different identities. And
Right.
that's kind of the premise
S-
that we're trying to make sure that people understand.
So your point of view is that the identities, or you have the sexual orientation, the sex, the color, whatever, should not play a part at all in any of these sort of in these sort of these discussions around who should we be hiring or promoting and so forth. It should purely be based on capability.
It should be based on capabilities, but where equity comes in, and here's where the challenge happens, Dean, where an organization may keep fishing from the same pond, or they keep going to the same place and saying, well, there's no qualified people of color, or there's no qualified women. Well, there's none, because you're going to the same place
I
to
get it.
recruit.
Yes.
So widen the screen a little bit,
Yes.
fish from different ponds, so
Yes.
you can get those qualified candidates from different identities, and bring them into the organization.
And I'm sure that's where therein lies the rub, right? Is that's where the sticking point is, where there's some friction is around that.
Hmm.
Are we hiring from a different pond? And in so doing, are we then saying, well, this pond, that person's just as qualified, even more qualified, but we're going to favor this one because they're lower, there's not as much representation.
Yeah, no, and that's not what we should be doing. You shouldn't be
Yeah,
hiring based on race, ethnicity, et
I get it.
cetera. What you're basically saying is that, like, let the recruiter go and do their job and get you the candidates that you should interview. And they'll
Yeah,
get you qualified
yeah,
candidates to interview, regardless of what they look like and where they
yeah,
come from and their backgrounds. And the rub is that if you have to search long and high and low to get these candidates, that you're lowering the standard, and you're
right.
not doing that.
All
You're
right, so
not
that's
doing
why I think it's so important that we started with definition, is because
that.
now we can be on the same page. I get what you're saying, and I agree with it. It makes sense from that
Yeah.
standpoint. Absolutely. So I when I first looked into you, Celeste, I thought like, all right, here's this woman. She's very accomplished. She's got this website, and she's using words to diversity, equity, inclusion. It's right up there, right? It's the name of your company. And I thought, wow, I mean, she's brave in some ways, I thought, because I thought like those three words put together right now are not the three words you hear most people talk about, right? It's become almost shunned to say those three words together, let alone the acronym. There's definitely a cloud over the heads of people who say that,
Mhm.
right? And of course, if you talk to some organizations, we do a lot of work with nonprofits, and those nonprofits sometimes they get government funding. Well, you can't have government funding for those nonprofits if you have diversity, equity, inclusion programs. They're being dismantled because of that very thing, and they have to we have to be careful of what we say, even though
Yeah.
we don't believe in it. We do have to be because we need the funding in order to survive. No margin, no mission, kind of thing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So you're not working for a large organization, right? You are an independent. You are your own person. But I'm curious as to, and I've seen some of your videos. You do a really good job of describing this. I really do appreciate it. What sort of acceptance, pushback process? This must be a different world for you than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago.
2 years ago.
When 2 years ago, when this was like everybody was talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, everybody was hiring up vice presidents to be able to run these programs, and now all those things have gone. What's life been like for you over the last 2 years when it comes to your business, relative to the fact that the conversation has changed so much?
Mhm. Well, so let me give you this a little bit of background on me. I started this business in the midst of all of this. So I retired as a chief diversity and inclusion officer. I'd been one for 10 years at a Fortune 100 company, and ups and downs going from Trayvon Martin to Me Too to xenophobia to the pandemic to all of these different things, ebbs and flows. And so I made the decision consciously to go into this because this is my passion, this is my purpose, and to go into and create a company, an organization where this was my platform. This is what I talk about. And
Hmm.
so in the midst of this, July of last year, so it wasn't so much that I was in this business, 2, 3 years ago, and then it's like, okay, how do I move this? I was in a global corporate organization through this as the chief diversity and inclusion officer. And yes, when there are challenges with the administration, when you are a nonprofit and your grants and your funding come from federal grants and they're saying you need to do this and that, understand it. If you're going to be able to fund your cause, you have to be able to make sure that you're getting what you need to be able to make sure that you keep your organization moving forward. For corporations and that have a bulk of their U.S. revenue coming from the federal government, yes, understand it. But Dean, don't be dismayed. The work is not going away
Hmm.
because people understand that in order for me to understand my customers, whatever it is that I sell, I need to understand them. And they're very diverse. The demographics of the United States show that. And so, as I stated earlier, if I'm going to be able to understand my customer, I need to be able to meet the needs of my customer and understand my customer, regardless of how they identify. So I can be able to meet the needs of my product and my service can be sold to them and given to them. So it's not something that is going to go away. The essence of it is not going to go away. It's going to be there. And in the management front, in the leadership front, let's go beyond hiring and talent acquisition. Let's go to management 101. I'm a manager, and my job is to optimize the performance of my team, whether that be 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. To optimize the performance of my team, I need to be having regular one-on-ones with them. I need to understand their skills, their capabilities, their strengths, their areas for development. I need to be able to put developmental programs in place for them so I can get them to the level of performance individually where they need to be. So the whole team their performance of the team can be optimized.
Hmm.
Those are acts of equity. I'm going to make sure that Sam and Jean and Joe and Sally, I understand their development needs, and I'm creating and contracting with them developmental programs that are going to get them to the level of performance that I need them to be at. And for each person, it's different. Yes, I can have blanket programs that are going to hit 80% of the people. Yes, so every corporation has that. But as a manager, when I managed people for almost 40 years, I knew exactly what their skills were, what their capabilities were, what their strengths were, what their areas for development were, and I made sure that I got them programs to make sure that they were able to excel. I understood their life experience. I had moms that had special needs children at home. They needed to be coming in at a certain time. They needed to leave at a certain time. I didn't talk and stress about when they were coming in, when they were leaving. I talked to them about these are your priorities for the year. These are your objectives. This is when they need to be done. Go forth and do it. And then we meet on a regular basis and we talk about what's needed. What do they need? What obstacles are in their way from them being able to outperform the way we need them to perform and get
Hmm.
those priorities done? That's management 101. It's meeting people where they are and getting them to the level of performance that you need them to be at in order for your team to thrive.
So it's slightly, let me back up a little bit. You said
Yep.
something recently about how important it is to sort of understand your customer. Your
Mhm.
customer could also be your employees as well, if you were to put it in that standpoint and align and adjust around that. I want to one more time, one more pass at this, and we can move on to something else, right?
No, go
But it
ahead.
is interesting that you have decided to keep these 3 words when some of your customers may have a problem with it.
Mhm.
So it sounds like your mission is to redefine it or to remind people of what the essence of these 3 words really mean so that we can be, so your job is not just what you do, but to redefine what we lost understanding around.
Yeah, and remind, not redefine.
Understand.
Remind.
I
Yeah.
understand. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Got it.
Mhm.
That's great. Well, let me pivot here a little bit
Yep.
because in some ways it is related to this next question. It has to do with walking your talk. Has to do with leaders of an organization or of a team who profess certain things, could be their values, could be our mission, whatever it might be that's on the wall in our break room. And yet we don't necessarily follow through on that. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Why are we struggling with this? Why is this it is the bane of so many employees to say my manager says one thing and does another, or he or she is professing these values but doesn't live them. So we've lost trust in these words that are so important around who
Mhm.
we are as an organization. What is the disconnect here? Why do we have such a hard time doing what we say we're going to do?
Well, I think it's maybe a couple of things. One is we need to stop doing performative stuff, check the box
Hmm.
stuff, if you will. We
Hmm.
need to truly, if you truly believe that this is foundational to your values as an organization, if that's what's on your break room walls, then your people, policies, practices, procedures need to align with that. So let's say, I'm going to use something simple. A company XYZ company says, foundational, what's important to us is values around treating people with dignity and respect. Okay. So if that's one of the values, then look at your policies, look at your leadership skills that you say are important, look at your promotion criteria, look at your C-suite, succession planning criteria for leadership roles. Those leadership skills, management skills, promotional criteria, hiring criteria. If you say that you're an organization that values dignity and respect, then dignity and respect components of it should be in that infrastructure. It should
Hmm.
be in your talent practices. It should be in how you evaluate leaders. It should be on how you evaluate people that should be promoted.
Mm.
It should be foundational and part of it. You don't just say the words, you integrate them into the policies and procedures and practices of your talent management. I call it the alpha to omega of employment.
Mm. I agree 100%. I want to add something to that
Yep.
wonderful list of things you just said and get your reaction to it. Since I seem to be hanging out a lot with CEOs and their teams and their boards, that seems to be the spot that I keep coming back to for whatever
Hmm.
reason.
Yeah.
Um, I am fascinated by the fact that these very smart people who are running these companies, some of them very, very large, are very good at creating the strategy and to roll it out, to send it out. You know, it's like send your kids out, right? They're off and doing what they're going to do, but they don't necessarily have the acuity or the awareness about how that's going to be received, nor do they feel that they necessarily need to behave in accordance to what they're expecting other people to do. Long story short, I think the hardest team, and I'm quoting a guy named John Katzenbach, who wrote a book called The Wisdom of Teams and Teams at the Top, is that the hardest team to create is the executive team because they've been paid and socialized and given identity and metrics and a lot of skills to lead, but they don't necessarily have the skills to be a part of a team,
Hmm.
which means we have to be the product of the product, right? We have to actually walk our talk. And that's the work that I love to do. I love
Hmm.
working with teams at the top who are wanting to do what you just said, treating people with dignity and have these things, fold into your performance management practices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they need to be able to embody that themselves because they
Yeah.
are the example that we're all looking at. That's the mom and the dad that we're paying attention to see if, in fact, we really mean what we say. And if we don't, then if they don't do it, maybe I don't need to do it. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
No, you're absolutely right. I have to tell you a joke. When I first started um, supporting, when I first got into the C-suite, when I first became a vice president, I remember a mentor of mine who'd been a senior vice president for a long time. She was getting ready to retire. And she said to me, as soon as I got promoted, she said, "Well, welcome to executive daycare." And I thought to myself, she's being cynical. But then a few months later, I just started seeing this stuff because my idea of a vice president, someone in the C-suite was they knew it all,
Hmm.
naively, right?
Right, of
They
course.
knew it all. Everyone aspired to be them. They walked the talk, they talked the talk. They were these perfect individuals. And boy, that went to the wayside within a few
Yep.
weeks of me, in those rings. And so, Dean, you're absolutely right. I've talked with, I had to present at our board. I had to present several times and talk with our executive teams across different CEOs. And how I would sort of present what I need them to do, okay,
Hmm.
is I start out with data. So I'm a Carnegie Mellon master's student, Carnegie Mellon University master's
Hmm.
about data. I I I'd look at the data and say, what is the story that the data is telling me? And then on top of that, I I I talk to real people and say, "Hey, the data is telling us this. What do you think?"
Hmm.
And so I get through that, I get real live um, storytelling, if you will, besides what the data is telling me. So I get the sort of, okay, here's kind of the grit of it. Here's what people are feeling. I bring the emotion into it. And then solutions, possible solutions. I ask those same people, what do you think we should do about it? And get their thoughts. And this isn't just, these aren't just the top of the house. These are through the whole organization. Change makers, if you will, people who care about the company and the culture of the company and all of that. And they're not all vice presidents, executive directors, senior directors. They're the people that have a span of influence where something comes on high, some directive, and they turn to this person and say, "Well, Joe, what do you think about that? You know, he says this, but what do you think?"
Hmm.
And they listen to what that person thinks. So those are the people that are in my sort of network, if you will, to get the pulse on the organization. And then I come to just like you said, you go to the board and they want to throw stuff down and
Yeah.
say, now just do it.
Right.
Well, I don't like to come that way because I need to understand how it's going to be received. And
Hmm.
so when I'm talking to the CEO, when I'm talking to the board, when I'm talking to the C-suite leaders, that's how I present my story that of what needs to happen because I've played it out with the people who it's going to impact and say if we want to make a change, if we and that's even beyond just from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint. It was any type of organizational change that we needed to put in place,
Yeah.
and they will provide that feedback. And so then you have the sort of, here's how we're going to implement. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we should implement it. And by the way, here's what you all need to do as leaders to make sure that you are walking the talk and know what's involved in being able to do it. Now, let's go back to what I said about if you're an organization that is built around, and you say your fundamental values are around dignity and respect, in those leadership interviews and succession plan discussions, that should be something that's discussed.
Hmm.
Does this leader demonstrate dignity and respect, not just for his peers, not just for his boss, but for the people within his organization, his or her organization? And most companies these days, they have pulse surveys, culture surveys, engagement surveys, all of that. Those, if you're a company that doesn't do those at least once a year, how are you getting the input and the data to understand the culture of your organization, what
Yeah.
people think, how they think? So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's Dean. That's just how I look at it. If yes, there are leaders that get into the C-suite offices. They're not very good leaders, but the people who are overseeing those leaders need to make sure that they have these checks and balances in place, because the people that are going to fail, ultimately I believe the organization's going to fail.
Yeah.
The organization's not going to do well because you're going to have people in the rank and file who don't want to give it that discretionary effort. They
Right.
don't want to, they don't believe in what you're doing. They don't believe in the mission or the vision of the organization. That's not a good place to be in as an organization. It's just not.
It's interesting. I was reflecting on another Gallup poll. You were talking about data
Mm.
recently came out that said that we are now, as a country, maybe even worldwide, engagement levels are the lowest it's been in a long time. And they were able to zero in on, well, if there is one thing that employees, for example, feel that they're not getting, that seems to be an indication for this lack of engagement. And engagement, again, is that extra effort to be able to
Yeah.
do something, right? It was around caring, feeling like you were cared for.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we're spending all this time at work. We are having an unconscious sort of desire for human connection, even though we know that we need to be doing certain things. But if we don't feel cared for, we may not get it at home because we're not at home very much, but we're going to have to get it somewhere. We still are
Yeah.
thirsty. I don't care whether it's in the Sahara Desert or whether in the Pacific Northwest. I'm still thirsty for something, right? And so that's, I think, fascinating is that managers sometimes forget that. But it's also because this a definition of extra effort is under this framework that we have to overexert ourselves in
Mm.
order to be successful. And you go into a company and it's already the conveyor belt, the whole process is moving pretty fast, which in and of itself is not bad. But it's almost like we are propagating this idea that we should be teetering on burnout
Yeah.
if we are going to be engaged. That what we really want from employees is engagement that is close to burnout because we know we're going to get so much more work from them. And I'm kind of stepping back and I'm thinking about this lately, which is to say, I love work. I put in long hours, but I also don't want to be burned out such that I can't do it in a year or 2 years or 5 years, right? So I think we are not looking at organizations from almost like an organic perspective, like it's its own living entity. The company is tired. The company needs a rest. The company needs a nap. It needs to recharge, right? We don't think that way, right? If you put your ear, to, I don't know, a train tussle or whatever, a rail, you can hear the train coming, right? Maybe it's 10 miles off. What are we putting our ear to when we were trying to listen to what the company is saying it needs, much
Mm-hmm.
like you would with like a person? Well, what do you need? What's going on? What's missing? And I don't think we do that for the company. We just do. And I don't deny that that's important. And we have Wall Street, and we have investors, and we have private equity, and we have goals and timeframes, and we might be underwater financially. And so there's a lot of pressure to move fast. And in some ways, it's our own demise because we're paying for our future failure by how fast we move today.
Yes, yes. Oh, you hit it on the head. When we think about,
I got on a riff. Sorry.
no, no, no. I mean, Dean, it's exactly the truth, and that's why, you know. So when you look at generations in the workforce, right? Boomers, Gen X, they were, that was part of. That's kind of, hey, it's it.
Yep.
We live to work, work, work,
Right.
work, 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 right?
Right.
Then you saw Generation Y that came in and they were like, "Oh, I don't live to work. I work to live."
Right.
And now look at Generation Z. They're even opting to not even go into these corporate conglomerate organizations because they truly don't believe in the same things that they do. And
Right.
it's like they're opting to either, be influencers or they're opting
Right.
to go to a small nonprofit or small startups or start their own business. They're opting to do other things and not just once they've already gone into debt by going to college, but when they get out of high school
Mm-hmm.
and they're saying, I'm going into the trades because I can earn as much money being a plumber as I can when I get out of school. Oh, and by the way, I don't have all this student debt either. So
Right.
there's so
Right.
many options that
Yes.
my kids are in their 20s, early 20s, in
Yeah.
grad school, and in my daughter's in first year vet student,
Hmm.
and um, they have choices. They've had choices when they came out of high school, when they came out of undergraduate, and now, their post degrees. They decided they wanted to do this. But a lot of kids, their friends in high school, no. They're like, no,
Mm-hmm.
because they're seeing their parents, they're seeing their friends' parents, they're seeing their friends' older brothers and sisters that are like stressed out, their hair's
Right.
falling out, they look 10 years older in their 30s and in their
Yeah.
40s. And you hit it right on the head. It's that like that hamster wheel.
Yes.
And
And yeah, and it's like I'm very curious. I'm not going to be around. You and I won't be around when we really see the results of it. But what happens when the baby boomers, and even some of the Gen Xers came right on
yeah,
their heels, they're no longer the dominant creator of structure in companies. They're no longer running these businesses. They're no longer in charge of these multi-billion dollar, P&L statements. Like
Mhm.
they're now, they talked about the great wealth transfer, which supposedly is going to happen. Trillions of dollars of wealth is going to transfer from the baby boomers to the Gen Xers. Well, that's not happening yet because the baby
No.
boomers want to go out and play pickup ball and, spend it as much as they can. And then they'll die when they're 90 years old, but they want to live
Yes.
to the very end. So it hasn't happened yet, but
No.
when it does, I'm really curious. I would love to come back and sit in on a board meeting in 50 years and see what the culture's like then, because the
Yeah.
power structure and those in power are no longer there. Like, what is that going to look
I
like?
would, Dean, I would think the same thing.
I'll meet you there. We'll connect up and we'll
We'll
come back
connect
in
up,
50 years.
exactly. But I see it, it's gonna be very, very different because when I look at this generation Y and this generation Z, and there's gonna be such a war for talent. We talk about a
Oh,
war for talent now.
totally.
They don't know what we haven't seen a war for talent yet.
No. Take a look at Japan.
Oh,
Yes.
we have not seen it yet.
Right.
And you're right. In our lifetime, maybe we won't have to see it or deal with it. But these kids that are not going to college, and think about you said you're in healthcare. Think about all those roles that require postdocs and all of
Right.
the scientists and all of these
Right.
different things. The war for talent is just not. It's going to be horrible. It is going to be horrible. And add on top of it, Generation Z, Generation Alpha that's coming after them, looking at what's happening now. My kids are looking at, look at this company, look at
Hmm.
Target, look at
Hmm.
this, look at that. So on top of the fact that, hey, the skills, the capabilities, I don't want to deal with all of that. Besides all of that, they're looking at these companies. Look how they're acting now.
Right.
I don't. They don't have the same ideals and beliefs and belief system that I do.
Right.
They're permanently on my do not go to list.
Yeah. And they smell bullshit.
Yes.
They know when there is a false statement without the behavior reinforcement. They can smell it, as we
They are
all
so
can. But
intuitive.
the baby boomers and the Gen Xers just sort of went, all right, I put up with this crap,
Do
and
what
you do
I'm
your
told.
best. And I'm focused on the results and I'm focused on the outcome. And I like the recognition and I like the title and I like the money. And I'm here to create security for my family. And that's what I'm driven to do.
Yep.
You're right. These going back to the talent thing that you talked about, it's like I really think this is a huge issue because kids, let me just get right up there. We're not having sex anymore.
Mhm.
Period. I mean, we're not as much as we used to, right? Bring on porn, right? Bring all these other things. We're not having sex. We're not having babies as much. The baby production is happening in certain communities like the Mormons and so forth. They're still having
Mhm.
6 and 7 kids. But the average American person is not having babies. Or if you take a look at Japan, that they are the canary in the mine for us because they have
Mhm.
such an elder population, but very few people who are having children and therefore being able to support all these older people
Yes.
because we don't have enough workers. That's where we're heading, and
Mhm.
that's what's spooky.
Very, very spooky. Very
Which is
scary.
so. One of the takeaways of this podcast is go out and have sex. But responsible sex and make sure that you love the person. You get a good, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Dean, you are a hoot.
Well, it is kind of a to the point though. I mean, there are such huge social economic changes that are happening right now that it's it's dizzying at times.
Yes.
It's like you can't watch all the news, otherwise you just want to suck your thumb and go into a corner and waiting for your next dinner to come, whatever. We have to stay engaged. We have to do
Yes.
the good
Yes.
work that like what you're doing and, make a difference wherever we can, even though we may not know how it impacts people. We have to trust the fact that it does.
Yeah. I mean, look at the increase in mental wellness organizations, nonprofits, companies, programs, things like that, because of the stress level in organizations,
Yeah.
the stress level that, frankly, kids in college as well, especially in the postdoc programs, the stress that people have. There are so many, the illness, and then it manifests itself in
Mhm.
illnesses. So you see it in healthcare. You see it. You just see it manifesting itself. This hamster in the wheel thing. It's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. People laugh at me. They say, they say, Celeste, since you retired, you look 10 years younger.
Oh, that's fantastic. Which is what did I look like before?
That's what I said too.
Is
It's like,
that like a
God.
backhanded compliment? You look great now, but you look like shit before. That's a
It's like,
true.
wow.
That's great. But you're
Yeah.
right though. I had a guy. The podcast came out last week. Santosh, I forgot his last name, but he's a researcher that basically is studying stress levels through a app on a watch. Long
Hmm.
story short, his research, and it's been backed up by other peer-reviewed data, that said that if you can reduce your heart rate by an average of 5 points over some period of time, I don't know how many months would it need to be, you actually gain an extra year of life. And that's the that's a
Yes.
stress-inducing heart rate. Now, heart rates that you're out jogging, that's good stress and you're releasing it through your movement. But the type of stress that causes your heart rate to go up, that stays in your body because you're frustrated, you're angry, you're sad, that sort of stress actually reduces our life expectancy. And he's
Yes.
measuring that. I thought, oh, this is
Wow.
right what we're talking about, that hamster wheel thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right, so we got to keep talking. We could keep talking here for days here, but let's move on to your book. Talk
Mhm.
about that, what it's all about. What could people anticipate reading when they read it, and also how they can follow you, learn more about you, connect to you if they so desire.
Yeah. Well, the book is called "The Truth About Equity: What It Really Is, What It Isn't, and Why Everyone Wins When We Get It Right."
Oh,
And
good
it
title.
basically is just that. It first talks about what it is, and I use the Deloitte had it, the fence and the rocks analogy, so people
Yes.
understand, first of all, the difference between equality and equity. And then I use it, I don't want to give it away, but I use the illustration in a even more deeper way. That's a more talks about it from a systemic standpoint, talks about groups that were left behind in the recent years, and 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 then it goes into talking about myths, and what are the myths of it, and then giving examples of when we get it right, this is what happens, and just giving some real life,
Hmm.
real world examples of that. And it's global in nature, so it's not just talking about the United States, but and so that book is available on Amazon right now if you want to go and take a look at it. And it's so in my publishers, we went back and forth on the title. And I said, "Nope, I want the word equity in the title."
See, I tell you,
Either
you are a
crazy or
fighter. I
something.
love it.
And so, but it's a very, it just takes a lot of people think equity is this enigma wrapped in a question mark. It
Yeah.
helps to really just break it down, very, very pragmatically. And then if you want to develop a relationship with me and not a one night stand, you can follow me on
Now wait a minute. Now you
www.
surprised me by that comment.
That's a nod to you in our earlier
Yeah, thank you
conversation.
very much.
You can get on my website, www.crwdiversity.com, and engage with me there. I have a equity in action model for managers that is available on the site as well. That it takes it from intention, I intend to action. What can I
Hmm.
do for operationalizing it for managers that need the help and want to become better, inclusive managers and
And you're a
leaders?
speaker too, right?
I am a speaker, yes. I just recently did a TEDx talk. My
Did
first
you?
one, yes,
Good
and
for
it
you.
was quite an experience.
Isn't
I,
it though? Did you love it, hate it?
I loved it, and I was fearful of it the whole time. I mean, just anxiety ridden. But once I got done, I was like, "Wow, this is nice. I could do
It's
another one."
yeah. I did one a few years ago, and I remember you probably had the same experience. You got this little 6-foot circle that you can stand in. And I
Yes,
don't know about you, but
yes.
I couldn't see past the 10 rows in the auditorium, and
Uh-huh.
immediately you get cotton mouth, and there's no water. And then you got this clock that's a digital clock that's beating down. And then when you go past your time, it's flashing red in your face. And then you're trying to remember your lines, because I had to memorize it all because I only
I
had
had
like
to as well. Yep.
15 minutes, 12 minutes. It's really short, but
Mhm.
I'm really glad I did it. But I told my wife, I said, all right, I finally got into this thing because it was long in coming before I actually knew that I got it. And I said,
Uh-huh.
I'm taking off the week. I'm working on this speech the whole time.
Yeah.
Celeste, you're a delight. Keep up the good work. And thank you
Oh,
for your courage and your voice, and making sense of stuff that I think hasn't been clear to people. Not just on the diversity, equity, inclusion piece, but on a larger scope around what makes great leadership and how do we build our companies in a way that works for everybody. And I really appreciate your work.
thank you, Dean. Thank you for the invitation and the discussion and being able to laugh.
Yes, we got to
So
do that.
important. So important.
Definitely. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to rate and review our show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps more people discover Leadervation and this kind of conversation. And if you're looking to strengthen leadership, culture, or team performance in your organization, you can learn more about working with me and Mission Facilitators International at mfileadership.com.